Prepare yourself to be blown away by the seismic sounds and scrutiny of Aftershocks Podcast with Chris Aiken and Matt Hartnett.
All right, well, here we go. Welcome to another episode of Aftershocks on AftershocksPodcast.com. And our guest on this episode is a rising star in the Southern California metal scene. He's the guitarist and singer for progressive thrash outfit Madrost, who are set to release their new full-length titled CHARRING the Rotting Earth, comes out in September on No Life Till Metal Records. Mr. Tanner Poppitt. Tanner, man, thanks for coming on. How you doing?
Thanks, guys, so much for having me. I really do appreciate it, and I'm doing well. How are you guys doing, man?
We're hanging in there, man. Doing good. Yeah, man. Well, the first question I want to ask you, man, is the band's name, Madrost. Go ahead and explain to us where that came from and what it means.
Sure. So it's Bulgarian for wisdom.
Okay.
No, none of us are from Bulgaria. It's, at the time when I chose it, it was like 2007. So about this time, people had, I don't know, sentences for names, shall we say? I can be so honest here. And I just wanted a one-word name because all of my favorite bands had the one-word names, Metallica's and Death's and whatnot. So I really just wanted something simple. And at that specific time, it was really difficult, and it probably still is. But in fact, luckily, I wouldn't know. So, but yeah, so I needed a one-word name, and this kind of just summed up everything that I kind of wanted music to be for me. Was just like hold some weight and substance behind it. So, sure. Yeah, that's pretty much it in a Reader's Digest version.
Oh yeah, cool, man. Awesome. Well, let's talk about the new release here, Charring the Rotting Earth. In my opinion, man, this is a major step forward for you guys, man, from your previous releases. And the first thing that stuck out to me was the mixing. Hans Grossman from Triptychon, he's played with so many other bands. He did the mixing and the mastering for the record, I see. And like I said, especially with the vocals, I really think the vocals were so balanced perfectly throughout the whole record. So how'd you guys want to hook it up with Mr. Grossman? How'd you get him on board for the record?
Sure. So how we always do our records is we record everything ourselves. And then once we have everything edited and whatnot, we kind of have the luxury of just choosing who we want to either mix or master it. And when we were throwing names around and somebody had mentioned Hannes Grossman from Necrophagist and Obscure and Triptychon, like you said, I don't know. I heard his a mix that he did for Christian, who was in Necrophagist, his recent solo album, and it just blew me away. So I wanted that specific kind of sound for us. A big step forward from our previous effort, The Essence of Time Masters No Flesh, which we did all of the things ourselves and sent it to Joel Grind for mastering. So we just chose him because of like I said, that solo record, and we wanted that specific sound in the band's kind of career, and so we can basically be on a whole other level, and we try to do that every record. We want to have the next record better than the ones before. So sure. hopefully that's the case. We don't know yet, though. We don't know.
It did.
You know what's weird though, man, is that you mention a couple of guys that they're both in bands and neither makes music that sounds like exactly what you do. What was it about them? Did you pick apart some of their music and say, well, I like how you did this and I like how you do that? Because really Necrophagist and obviously Joel's band do not sound like what you do.
I think what that came down to mostly was not, yes, they were familiar with extreme metal and extreme music, kind of how we play, but obviously we're the kind of band that tries not to sound like everybody else. And I don't know if, like I said, if we do a good job of that, but we liked those bands and we know that those bands are familiar with how extreme metal should sound like. So sure. If you take that influence and invite it into the band's sound and stuff, this is kind of like what you get. So we're always looking for the next level people to bring us up to their level, because in order to do that, you have to work with the best, because you're only as strong as your weakest link, so to speak. So before we had hired our friends pretty much to mix and master our stuff, sure. and it was great for the time being, but we want to continually, I guess, grow and get better as a band. You know what I mean? So, and with so much music out there, like literally a few months ago, it's the Spotify thing where he's like, you have to make music pretty much every week at this point because of people's fucking attention spans. I do the complete opposite, and I make the records when I want to make it. So with that in mind, it has to be quality. It can't just be quantity, because I'm not a quantity guy. So I'm more of like the old school where it just, everything has to be quality for me. And it's just, they're just familiar with extreme music, and that's kind of what appeals to me.
Sure. Now, you mentioned that you worked with guys that are familiar with extreme music. From listening to your releases, I don't get the opinion that you focus a lot on listening to it yourself. I mean, obviously you're a fan of it, and obviously you have listened to it, but I don't get the feeling at all that you go and find ideas from it, because you do a lot of stuff that borders more into the proggy side and the Meshuggah side than you ever do going into, straight up death metal or what are they calling it now, deathcore, or any of that stuff. Do you indeed try to write and create music in a way that's not, so focused in on stereotypes or on styles?
Right. Well, this is probably going to bum me out, but I listen to a lot of prog rock. So ELP is a huge influence on me. And I know, like, King Crimson and those are the kind of bands that I like to listen to. So, but the problem with those kind of bands, and I love them to death, but the song always got kind of trampled on, as I say. The song suffered. So what I like to do is incorporate those kind of, prog elements, and incorporate it in a way that makes sense to the listener. You know how like Rush is the perfect example for me. They take all these influences, put it in a song, and the song still doesn't suffer. You know what I mean? People can still latch onto it. So those are the kind of prog bands that I kind of gravitate towards. And you're right, Chris. There are some technical bands that I love listening to. But I don't try and take their songwriting, if that makes sense. I'm trying to take the technicality, but incorporate it in a way that, like, basically if you take technicality, incorporate it in Metallica, that's pretty much kind of what I'm kind of going for. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, because you still have the songwriting, and so that's the main focus. Because when you listen to records, I can ask you guys the same thing. When you listen to records and stuff, what's going to appeal to you guys? Is it the song or is it the technicality?
The song. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Song. It's always the song.
Yeah. No, great point.
But it's kind of lost, though, man.
Yes, I have to agree with you on that. It is lost. A lot of people are starting to look more towards what you can do, how much you can sort of masturbate on each instrument, than actually, like you said, what's important to the song. But I think you guys did that really awesome on this record, and I'm going to get to that. We were texting a little bit this week, and I mentioned you. I said, I really think you guys took it to the next level on this record, and I'll just explain to why I think so. And a lot of it has to do with a lot of the little things. So, for example, the song placement. I really think the way you placed the songs on the album was perfect. It really flew nicely. It was a nice, natural, succession from one another. I mean, I'll give you an example. Even just, at the end of the record, the last two songs, you had Pulverized, a minute, nice little like hardcore punk song almost sounding. And that kind of sets up now the longest song on the record, the title track. And it's just the way everything sort of flowed on this record. I think really, it was really awesome. I think you guys really captured that, fantastically. The second thing also is the length of the songs. I think when you have this type of music you guys play, a lot of, like I said, the progressive, sort of stuff. I think when you keep it between those 4 and 5 minutes, which you guys did, I think it's perfect. I think it's just enough to, be able to show off what you guys can do technical wise. At the same time, you fitted just a nice, tight song in there. I mean, just, you guys really tightened up a lot of the tracks, instead of, and just the way you kind of, I guess, placed, verses and chorus and everything which is really, I think, it was really catchy. The songs really kind of was sticking in my head. Whereas I think the previous records was like the music was great. Everything was just more brutal and just real, super fast and aggressive. Where I think really on this record, you guys sort of settled it into a little bit, more like you settled down a little bit on some of the parts, and you have some groovier parts in there, stuff that I think you didn't really maybe have before that really, I think, captures the listeners a little bit more. I mean, did you guys make a conscious, decision in terms of, say this, the length of the songs and like in terms of the song placement, or was that just sort of naturally how it went and it just kind of worked out well that way?
Yeah, it was definitely natural. How we write songs is a little bit different. We just let it flow, so to speak, and then I take the riff ideas home and structure everything. And so, when I'm structuring it, and because I have to sing over it, it has to make sense to me, unfortunately. So when especially playing it live, if we're going to be playing these songs live every fucking day, it has to make sense.
Sure.
And if it makes sense to you guys, that's a bonus, so to speak, but we also try to have, like I said, the quality has to be there. It can't just be a bunch of riffs and nothing makes sense, so to speak. And as far as the song placement goes, I mean, some of my favorite records flow so nicely, like Metallica's Master of Puppets and whatnot. And what's brilliant about that is that you can just listen to the whole record. And I'm sure you guys, like myself, who's a podcaster and radio guy, we listen to so much music. So in order to make your records kind of stand out, you have to have that. You have to have a flow. And I mean, how many times, I'm sure you guys can speak for it, where you get a record and it's like not even the first time listening to it, it's like, okay, I'm bored of this. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
And so with me, I want everybody to listen to like every song I listen to. And so I'm always striving for that specific goal, so I want you guys not to take the fucking record off the turntable and not have to, change the song or whatever.
Sure. No, absolutely. One of the other things too, I wanted to point out about the record in terms of the songs is, and this is, I think, the most important part of, why I think you guys really took a big step on this record, was that each song, it's got its own sort of signature hook or piece to it, where you can distinguish each track from the other very easily, especially with the guitar. But you brought in just like, for instance, I'll use, for example, Dying Thoughts. There's two trademarks in that song that really stick out, that really makes me, I'll hear that and go, yeah, that's Dying Thoughts, because it's got that awesome intro. It also reminds me of the song Controlled Demolition by Fear Factory off the Mechanized album. So, I mean, I love that intro. And then, of course, you had the piano parts in there as well. That just gives it that little extra piece that makes it really stand on its own from the rest of the songs. And the thing is, every song has that. As I say, Pulverize is that, your quick little hitter there, the 1 minute hitter. And of course, you got the longest track. I mean, right after that. But I mean, it's just, to me, every song has got something in it where it's got its own now unique hook, and just like its piece in there where, it's able to stand on its own instead of everything just sounding like, just, pure aggressive guitar, madness. So, I mean, with those, I mean, did you guys purposely, once again, did you intentionally really place those, samples and pieces there to kind of give its own identity to each song? Because I think you guys did a brilliant job of doing that.
Oh, thank you, man. And the answer, I guess, is yes, the short answer. But the long one would be, when we were writing certain parts, I automatically knew that there was going to be some sort of keyboard parts over it, because the rule of thumb with me is that anything kind of goes. So I don't like to limit myself as far as what we can add into our music. So there's a Madrost record now with fucking xylophone parts, in the title track. So
Yeah.
I don't like to limit us as far as what we can kind of throw in there, because and at the end of the day, I want us to stand alone, and because there's thousands of fucking death metal bands, there's thousands of all sorts of bands, but I only, and it's maybe an ego sort of thing, but I only wanted there to be one Madrost. There's only one. So when people would go see us live or whatever, their favorite songs would be the songs that like we enjoy playing the most. So and I like a lot of layers in my music to begin with. So, I'm glad that that more people are kind of open-minded like that as well, with prog music and jazz and stuff, and some of the stuff that I listen to a lot. And there's like I said, it has to make sense, and every piece should stand alone. Why waste your time writing a piece of music if it's not gonna do anything? It's just there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I'm curious, when you write, especially as somebody that writes more orchestrated music than the traditional death metal band that just, plays the drums, plays blast beats as fast as you can and mixes a riff over it and then goes, and calls it a song, as a lot of them do. What is it exactly that you hear, and how much do you need to hear before you know you can use it? Is it a single riff? Is it an extended part? Do you hear a riff and imagine an extended part? Talk a little bit about how you craft this music that is, while certainly extreme, is way more developed than the average band creates.
Sure. So what happens when we write is me and Big Cat, our guitar player, will get in a room with Superior Drummer, and we literally, if we find a drum beat or something, it's like, okay, that drum beat's cool, let's do something over it. And we just sort of riff until we can find something that kind of works. And then once we find the specific piece, it just kind of it's like our conversation right now, right? We're bouncing ideas off of each other and talking. It's not like it's being forced.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So it has to flow naturally for me to be able to, I guess, put it in a song or whatever. And once we find certain riffs that make sense and certain riffs that I can actually sing over, that determines kind of what's the verse, pre-chorus, the chorus, the bridge, middle section, if we're going to make something epic, and bringing in our friends to do the, piano parts, like Sam did with from Xanthocort or whatever, came in and did all of his piano parts over our riffs. So it just has to flow naturally between me and Big Cat, so to speak. And so with that, it's it's kind of, I don't know how to, let's see here. It's just it's a weird way of writing. I get it, but that's the only thing that makes sense to us at this point in our careers.
Definitely. Now, Tanner, the one thing that you guys did change this time is that you're putting this one out on a label instead of doing it independently. For you guys, for a smaller band that has built itself for the last 8 years or whatever independently, what did you gain by bringing on a label, and what did you have to give up in order to get a label?
Okay, so the reason for the label is just because nobody cared, nobody wanted us. So this is the first time in our career that we have some actual help and support, and people believe in the band. So huge shout out to No Life Till Metal Records. And so what I had to give up for it was not a lot. We still retain our rights and everything like that. It's just like, it's a licensing kind of thing. Like we're kind of giving them permission to press, the CDs and vinyls, and so we haven't really given up anything, which is a great thing, because most labels, the 360 deals that I'm sure you guys talk about all the time, they exist. And so we just kind of got lucky with this deal, and they just believed in the band so much that they offered us, to be on the label. And so what we've gained from it is just a whole new fan base and more connections and whatnot. And it's just made the band look a little bit more professional, so to speak. So it's that next step. It's always trying to become, bigger and better, and just little steps at a time. So I'm not trying to go for this huge fucking grand hurrah of getting signed by a huge label or whatever. I'm just trying to take it one step at a time, and do what makes sense for us.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm going to piggyback on Chris's question about the record label, Tanner. What's your take really on the importance or non-importance, if any, of being with an independent label these days? Do you think they're still indeed really crucial to a band like you, like Madrost, like to your success, or really has their influence and support really been severely diminished in your opinion, because it's really become conventional wisdom these days amongst a lot of musicians that, you know, record labels are no longer needed.
Well, I think going off of that point, it's like PR. Like you have to have PR in order to market yourself properly. And so without that, you go nowhere. So I think having a label is kind of like that too, in a sense where, you know, yeah, you could do it all yourself, but you have to obviously do it the right way and hire outside people. And I think people are kind of scared to do that because they've heard so many horror stories with labels. And I was kind of one of them until this specific point. But you know, it's definitely at this stage in my personal career, it's definitely needed. More so than I thought, because I was like that, you know, that guy in the boat where it's like, I don't need a label, I can just do everything myself. But you reach a wall that you can't get you know, you can't get over without help. It's weird. People don't take bands seriously unless you're signed. And it's kind of, it's a strange like stigma, if I can be so blunt and honest there. But I think that's the importance. It's like you going to Harvard and getting a degree. The degree means something because you went to Harvard. You know what I mean? It's because of that, the prestigiousness of, you know, getting signed itself, so to speak. Hopefully I'm making sense to you guys.
Yeah, no, absolutely makes total sense. I mean, that was always sort of a you know, a way that people looked at labels anyway. And like you said, I agree with you. I still think, you know, there is obviously still room for labels, you know, regardless if, you know, the band wants, you know, a band wants to work with one or not. They still, I think, believe too, they do bring, you know, they're important. So like you said, like for instance, with you guys with No Life Till Metal, one of the things that's great about it is, like you said, it's opening you guys up to another, you know, fan base. I mean, people who are fans of the label now know who Madrost is, and they can start listening to your record. So I definitely think they serve their purpose. So yeah, no, you make total sense. The other thing I wanted to ask you too was really about the underground scene in music down in Southern California there, you know, with the metal scene. I know for years, you know, Southern California is always known for having those crazy backyard shows. You know, it goes back decades, even to like when Van Halen, you know, was still playing. They would play in San Gabriel Valley. They would play all those backyard, you know, shows before they, you know, played the Sunset Strip and everything. Are those shows, are they still something that's really prominent down in the SoCal scene within Orange County in LA still?
You know what's funny? I wouldn't know it, as obviously for obvious reasons at this time because of the whole thing. But
pre-pandemic,
pre-pandemic. You know, Santa Ana is nice for this stuff. There's a lot of backyard shows, and it's great. I'm glad that bands are still doing that. And there's a shitload of people that come out there, because there's not a lot of like all ages venues out here. I don't know what it is. You know, in Ohio, where I think Chris is from there.
Yep.
But I don't know if there's a lot of like all ages venues, but there's not a lot anymore out here. So when we were first starting, we were kind of lucky because of those specific reasons, and venues have kind of shut down. And going back to you know, the label question, I also wanted to add was, you know, when you have a label and stuff, and they know exactly who your band kind of pertains to, and that's kind of the market they go for. That's also another reason why having this specific label with Scott and No Life Till Metal Records is huge for us, because they understand the band and can push us in certain markets that'll make sense.
Right.
But yeah, as far as the backyard scene goes, yeah, Santa Ana I think is the big one out here in Orange County, and then Anaheim is a big one too, and it's kind of, it's like the last bastion. It's the last hurrah for all ages stuff is backyards and, you know, shows. And it doesn't diminish you know, the bands at all that are playing these things. But, you know, I just feel bad for the fans who are not 21 and above.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. And in the end, that's the group that you almost need to get when you're a young band, because, you know, no offense to old guys like me, but old guys like me are not at the death metal shows. You know, they're staying at home and listening to their 6 Feet Under albums, you know, you know, when their wife isn't looking. But you know, the one thing, Tanner, and this really doesn't relate directly to your band, but I'm curious your thoughts on this. I have always thought, not always, but in the last 15 years or so, I guess, that the ultimate enemy of extreme music is the press themselves. And the reason I've thought that is because the press has created all these mythical subgenres of music. and they have all these names, whether it's deathcore, or emo-core, or death metal, or black metal, or, you know, gore metal, or horrorcore. You know, there's all these different labels. And I think in the end, unlike other styles of music, death metal fans can listen to all of it probably equally without being like, well, that's not death enough for me, or that's got too much melody for me, or that's, you know, whatever. I think death metal itself is based so much on just the harshness of it that the changes in style shouldn't matter. And I think by labeling everything, the press has really diminished it, because most people, they'll see a new band that they don't know, and they'll say, oh, well, this says that they're deathcore. Well, I'm not a deathcore fan. I'm a black metal fan, or whatever. And I think it's a terrible disservice for bands. I've always thought it. I'm curious what you, who's in the industry and in a band, if you agree, or if you think that it's needed.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Chris. I think having all these subgenres of subgenres is a marketing thing.
Right.
And I think being in the press, you know, we try to change that. That's kind of how and why I got into being, you know, a host of a radio show and a podcaster, was to kind of change that way of thinking.
Sure.
It does a disservice to the bands, but the bands also do a disservice to themselves, because the camaraderie isn't there anymore. Bands don't work together as much. And I know it has nothing to do with your question, but I just want to throw it out there that there are things that bands can do differently that can change how, you know, scenes for the better. I mean, let's look at the 80s speed metal scene, you know, the Bay Area scene that everybody fucking talks about. You know, it's like the biggest fucking deal in the planet. And those bands work together, you know what I mean? And I think that's what we need more of, you know, in our communities. We need bands that can help push each other up, so to speak, and it's not a competition all the fucking time.
Right.
But the problem is you need every band to do that, and bands are fucking lazy, as you said multiple times on your show. Musicians are fucking lazy. It's true. But I also blame, you know, I also blame the fans and stuff too when it comes to what shows they go to, because most go for nostalgic purposes. They go see the old school bands and it's to relive those glory days. But at the same time, you know, if there were more all ages venues, it could probably help all of our cases, because once the Metallicas and the Maidens go, you know, away from this world, all you're going to be left with is bands like us, and it's, you know, just even me coming on this podcast is a huge thing. So thank you guys again for it. But I think that's what we need more of. It's just a network, a collection of support, and we don't have that.
Right. Yeah. And it does seem though like the genre-ing, if that's a word, is a major detriment. I mean, you know, there's no reason, and I'm going to throw a band that's not sound wise like your band, but I think you would do well in front of their audience. Would be like a Kill Switch Engage type of a band. Absolutely. I think your band would do excellent in front of their fans, just because their fans like heavy music, period. They just like heavy music. It's never going to happen though, because they'll say, well, you're a death metal band and they're whatever, extreme core or whatever. And it's so, and I mean, I know I'm going, you know, bigger bands, but it's even on the lower level, on the local level rather. You know, local bands do it to themselves. In the old days, it wasn't unusual to see just a straight up rock band play with a pretty heavy metal band, because the camaraderie was all there. Now it's like, well, you don't make the same music we do. Well, why would you want a band to play with you that makes the same music that you do? If it was me and I was in a band, I want to have two different styles so that they buy my CD and their CD, not just one or the other.
True. And to go off of your point too, there's two things. One, promoters need to stop booking 8 different bands, eight fucking metal bands on one show. And the show starts at 6:30 and there's 8 fucking bands with one stage. With changeover times, the headlining band's not going to go on till 3 o'clock in the fucking morning. I mean, It's happened more times than ever. And you're right, Chris. We need to start, doing that more, and not being afraid to play with other style bands. You know what I mean? Like it shouldn't be like, like I said, we've segregated ourselves. we need to have the camaraderie back in heavy music. So if you're a heavy death metal band or a black metal band or a speed metal band or just a heavy metal band, we should be able to play together. And I think also what tends to happen is a little bit of ego. You know, if there's a band that's better than yours, say on the stage, you know, live wise, it tends to not happen. And it's kind of happened for us, not speaking, you know, with our egos and stuff, but, you know, like it's hard for us to get certain shows because, you know, in my opinion, let's rock. Like I want that competition on stage. I want to be able to blow your bands off the stage,
right?
You know, let's go, so to speak. And people are kind of afraid to do that because it'll hurt their business. And you know, I don't know how to help it.
So that's really the big problem. Like you said, the camaraderie is obviously it's an issue, you know, within the scene itself. And obviously, you know, you do a great job trying to build that camaraderie. You've got your own podcast, you've got your own Razor Radio, you do with your buddy Andy. Why don't you go ahead and talk a bit about both of those for the audience, and also, you know, what your vision or your goal is for doing both of those, you know, outlets, for having a radio station as well as a podcast.
You know, so I do a podcast called Poppitt's Corner where I literally sit down and interview, you know, a guest one-on-one because I like to have their story. I don't like interviewing a band because there's fucking 5 people talking and my point never gets answered, so to speak. My questions never get answered. So I like the one-on-one kind of conversations. And so what my ultimate goal is to do is to expose us bands, because we have a huge scene out here. So many bands, but there's not a lot of people covering them. You know, there's not a lot of like documentarians, and there's not going to be any fucking documentaries based on our community. So if we have an outlet, which we do, we're in the podcasting world. So like what Chris does and what you guys do with, like, you know, on your various respected programs, you know, with the older bands and stuff. And now with Aftershocks, you're going after more the new school bands, right? And that's huge because we need to have those avenues and platforms. So I pretty much just do the same thing, except I'm kind of in the heart of it, right? Because LA is a huge mecca for fucking metal. And it's just sad that there's not a lot of people documenting it, which is weird. I mean, if you asked yourselves that same question 30 years ago, you would say, yeah, there's going to be tons of people doing it for the next generation. And there's really not. No, there's not. So my ultimate goal is to get exposure for us bands, and do it in a way that, like I said, makes sense. Going back to the original, you know, point to this interview, where it has to make sense. So, and people have gravitated towards it, and not saying it's, you know, I'm good or bad as a host or whatever. That doesn't mean anything to me. My ultimate goal is just to expose you guys to, you know, to a bigger kind of community, and get your stories heard before it's too late.
Sure. No, good point. Just last question I got for you, Tanner. In terms of the band now, you know, for you guys now, I mean, what do you, now that you're on a label, you've got some label support, you're really starting to make, you know, waves in the scene. It's really obvious, you know, just, you know, from what I hear and everything. I mean, the name's starting to really become familiar with a lot of metal fans. Is this something that you're looking to potentially, you know, pursue? I mean, obviously, you know, you're a guy, you've got a full-time job, you've got a life outside of your band. And that's one of the things too, I think that's been it's such a challenge these days is, you know, it's just a great, you know, for instance, the, you know, playing on like on a Sunset Strip, but we've talked about it. I mean, it's pay to play stuff. Most bands aren't going to do that anymore, and wisely they shouldn't. So it's just really hard for anybody really to be in any full-time band. You know, you're one of the very lucky ones these days if you can actually do that. And obviously then having 4 to 5 band members, you know, each person then really has to, you know, sort of make it their life. And that's, you know, pretty much, I mean, the odds of that happening are close to, you know, slim to none. So is this something that you would love to obviously potentially pursue, or is it something you're pursuing full time, or is it just more of like a, you know, I love music, I love playing it, it's a hobby, I'm going to just, you know, we're going to do what we can do and just kind of see where it leads us?
Absolutely. Absolutely the second one. I don't, I don't want this to be my job, because then I'm not going to like it anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want my podcasting to be my fucking job. I don't want to have like sponsors and this and this and this to tell me what to do. So in that aspect, I just do it because I have fun. And once that fun kind of goes away, then I'll probably end up going away, because it's not going to be fun anymore. When you're not making a living on it, the only thing you have is to have fun. So when that becomes, irrelevant, I don't know. So do I, kind of thing. Like, I don't want to be a part in something that I have to, I'm not going to waste my time doing this. I do it because I enjoy doing it. And I just want to see where it kind of leads to and stuff. And also too, I want to make music great again. I want to bring back the songs, and it doesn't matter what style of music you play, but there has to be songs. And I think, especially like in like the traditional heavy metal thing that's happening nowadays, you'll hear the same riff for like every fucking band. And the song is just like a cheesy kind of throwback, so to speak. But, there are bands doing it greatly, it the right way. Like you got Haunt and Night Demon and stuff. And those are the kind of bands that I would like to play with and to be like, is still do what I do and have the songs, period.
Awesome. Great, man. Well, we're going to wrap things up here, Tanner. Why don't you go ahead and throw out, let everyone know where they can, listen to the, eventually when it comes out, the new Madrost record, Charring the Rotting Earth, as well as talk up just about where they could also listen to your podcast and the radio as well.
Absolutely. So we're on Spotify and all the other places, band and podcast for that matter. Charring the Rotting Earth comes out September 25th, 2020, on No Life to Metal Records. We'll have vinyl and CDs. I think the vinyl is almost sold out. So if you haven't gotten your copy, definitely do that at rocksrecords.com or nolifetometalrecords.com. And then obviously Razor Radio, we're going to have razorradio.com, to where we'll pretty much be doing what you guys do, except in Orange County here in LA. And so, facebook.com/Madrost, madrost.bandcamp.com. And you can find anything pretty much there. CDs and vinyls will only be sold through the label, though.
Okay. So. Excellent, man. All right. Well, yeah. Also, what we'll do here too is we'll end the podcast, as you know how we do it here, Tanner. You can go ahead and throw us a song that we'll play a clip from, so that the audience can get a taste of it and check out some new music on the new album.
Absolutely. Well, I'll turn it over to you, Matt, and you pick a jam, and we'll go out with whatever you guys decide.
All right. Well,
thanks so much again for having me, guys.
Yeah.
Really,
well, I'm gonna pick "To Prevail the Wicked." That's my favorite off the record. So
perfect.
Cool. All right. Thanks a lot, Tanner.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much.
Take care, man. Thanks for listening to Aftershocks. For more episodes, go to our website at www.aftershockspodcast.com. Visit us on our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages for more news and information on the podcast. And be sure to subscribe, listen to, and review all episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all other podcast platforms. For your music listening pleasure, visit our website or go to www.shockwavesradio.com. For all comments and questions, please email us at info@aftershockspodcast.com.